What is up, Terps fans? Welcome into another Fear the Podcast. I'm Matt Moderno. I'm going solo here today. I did have a guest lined up originally to talk about international mystery man Guillermo Del Pino, the latest commitment to Maryland basketball. Unfortunately, that fell through, so you're stuck with me. But I did spend a large portion of the day here today watching game film of Del Pino, and it's interesting. He's an interesting guy. So we're going to get into it here a little bit. He's a 6'4" guard, born January 12th, 2007. So still 18 years old. So he'll be 19, midway through the season. Averaged 10.3 points per game, 2.3 rebounds, 1.7 assists, 1.3 steals, basically no blocks per game. Shot 41% from the field. We'll get into that a little bit more and why that number is so low. And then about 34% from three, which going to caveat that a little bit, and 77% from the free throw line, which is pretty solid. So, yeah, he's going to be on Maryland team next year. If you're not familiar with this yet, he is just, again, a signing that kind of came out of nowhere. He'll be a class of 2025 guy. I spent this year playing the Spanish third league, essentially, which is, their third division. Not the greatest competition, but he's playing against some grown men and getting some good experience. So I don't think like it'll be a total situation where he's like a fish out of water from a physicality perspective. But good size. I think the question is, is he more of a one or a two? I don't say he's like the traditional pass first point guard, but about a 2-to-1, assist to assist to turnover ratio per game, especially in international play was even better with some of the other competition closer to his age and not playing against men, but under like the FIBA 17 and under, and in a FIBA Euro Championship for 16 and under, he was the MVP of that tournament. Spain won the gold. Averaged 18 points a game and 4 or 5 assists a game. Like just been really solid. At his sort of respective age level. So I think this is a guy that'll scale up here over time. I mentioned is a little inefficient this year, especially shooting the ball. I think at the lower levels, he was able to use his size and physicality to get to the rim a bit more. Really good body control and like footwork. Shockingly, is really good at the Euro step, kind of knifing through the lane. Finishes well with both hands, about 51% around the rim, which is solid for kind of a skinny younger guard. So some really good positive stuff there. Just kind of walk through a little bit more about his game. Like I mentioned, he is still a little on the skinny side, but tall. So he's able to see over the defense. Seems to have like decent length. I don't think he's going to measure out as like the craziest plus wingspan of all time, but helps him be disruptive, get his hands on passing lanes. I think guys that have decent feels for the game are able to make up maybe for some physical limitations and things like that with just using good anticipation and understanding of the game. So you see a little bit of that from him. I mentioned the 1.3 steals per game, but there are definitely more times than that where he's just disruptive and kind of in the way, and also just prevents certain smaller guards from making certain passes because they're deterred by the plus size there, which I think is pretty cool. That's maybe how he's able to fit in a Buzz Williams system, is just sort of making up for not being what you typically think of from the Buzz guy of like this crazy athletic physical specimen. I am wondering a little bit if this is a guy they can sell on the vision of redshirting. That might be something they consider here, depending on how the rest of the roster fills out. If there's a lot of older veteran guards that they're expecting to give minutes to, it might be a thing that they talk to about Guillermo with. And also Guillermo Del Pino, the nickname's got to be GDP. Like we just lost DHS. GDP is a pretty like badass nickname, I think. So if that one catches on, remember you heard it here first. I want credit for that one. But yeah, GDP, I think this is a dude that is going to be an interesting long-term play for the Terps. Arman Jovic, who does PDT scouting, is a really good, savvy international scouter, said his shot-making abilities have grown to be very impressive and are now a core staple of his game. I think a lot of that is because, honestly, he hasn't been able to just get to the rim at will the way he did at some of these younger levels. He's having to pull up a lot more for mid-range jump shots and getting cut off before he can get all the way to the rim. That probably changes with some strength, which is why that red shirt question, might be interesting for him. We'll see how much they could maybe bulk him up over the summer before having to make that overall decision. But there's just a lot of situations where he does sort of get cut off and has to settle for like these mid-range pull-up fadeaways almost. And he's short on almost all of them, like good arc, but they seem to hit front rim and bounce straight up for the defense to grab the rebound. So just don't love that kind of shot profile from this guy. I think that's why you get the 41% overall field goal percentage, considering he is kind of good once he actually gets to the rim. So maybe playing on a team with some spacing would be good for him, which looking at this Maryland roster, the question is going to be perimeter shooting and floor spacing. So, maybe that's not like the best recipe for him, but I think where he's going to be really interesting for the Terps, especially if he does play this year and maybe somewhere he can help already, is in transition, especially again at the FIBA level for the age group level stuff. He's been able to get rebounds himself because of his height and start the fast break. He's really good about passing the ball ahead, and he's just sort of good at like setting up athletic finishers around him in transition. So that's something you look at this Maryland team. You got Pharrell Payne maybe running the break with him, or an Andre Mills on the wing, or Solomon Washington. Like these are going to be dudes that are able to finish. And I mentioned this on the episode we did with Elijah Saunders, which if you haven't listened to that, please go back and check that out. Also, rate, review, subscribe to all this stuff. It helps the podcast be more discoverable. And we want to keep growing this thing and get you more good interviews. So the more people find it, the better it can do. So if this is a YouTube watch for you guys right now, please hit that like button for us. That goes a long way. But anyway, I mentioned with Elijah, he's really good at like catching lobs at the pick and roll. And I could see Delpino being somebody that does that really well, with somebody, especially like Saunders, who could actually step out and is a threat to pick and pop. So some versatility there would be really good. And just the European players in general seem to be pretty savvy in pick and roll. I know I just made like a gross generalization there, but that is just the style of play. So I think that's something that you could see Buzz incorporate with somebody like Guillermo here as he starts to settle in. Don't want him taking too many of those mid ranges, but we've seen this from Buzz Williams. You saw it with Wade Taylor the fourth at a totally different scale. But if guys are trying hard on defense, he gives these guards a lot of freedom to just go out and cook and do their thing. And maybe he can live with some of these pull ups. And I mentioned them being a lot of short, sort of high arcing shots. There's something for guys, like Washington and Payne to go get off the glass and try to put back. So, maybe they could live with that shot profile a little more than other teams are willing to. I mentioned the 34% from three already. Not the greatest number, but there were a lot of situations where he had the ball in his hands late in a shot clock and had to take some of these grenade threes. And, I definitely think that factors in the percentage. He doesn't take a crazy high volume of them. So he seemed to be doing more of that against, adult men competition. I think that's a bailout because of the lack of strength. So as he matures physically, you probably see him be more selective about some of these deeper perimeter shots he's taking. And he's a 77% free throw shooter, which is pretty solid. You always hear this during, NBA draft analysis, but free throw percentage is usually a very good indicator of touch. And that's a very good indicator of how people's long-term shooting, will translate from like the NBA 3-point line and things like that. So I do think this is a guy that's got decent touch. I mentioned finishing with both hands. Like he's a crafty, savvy guy. So I think there's something there to like. And he was much better from catch and shoot. So if there are other creators around him, if you've got a Miles Rice driving and kicking, like if his feet are set, I don't think there's a lot like wrong with the shot from, a form or aesthetic perspective. So I think this is a guy you could reasonably bank on being a decent perimeter shooter long term. He may never be, Selton Miguel, where he's hit 45% of his threes or something like that. But if he can beat 38% even, I think that's on this current iteration of the Maryland Terps, you will absolutely take a guy that's high 30s. There just isn't that much perimeter shooting to go around. So I think that's maybe where he could sort of differentiate himself from some of these other younger guards they're looking at. Someone like a Tyler Jackson, he can get hot and get streaky and hit a couple deep threes, but is another guy that's probably a low 30s percentage 3-point shooter. And he's a much sort of craftier, dynamic ball handler too. Tyler Jackson is. So they'd be just sort of different players. So I don't think that taking Guillermo Del Pino by any chance means that they can't take Tyler Jackson. It would be interesting to see if they could get them both minutes next year. So if both guys end up on this roster together, I would be shocked if you don't see at least one of them redshirt, just sort of given the glut of guards at that point. So kind of interesting to see. I've seen the question float around like at 6'4", is he a point guard? Is he a shooting guard? I think there's a little bit of both there. Like he did a lot more creation for himself here this season in that Spanish league, which it wasn't, it was sort of mixed results, right? Like 10 points per game. But at the FIBA, 16 level, especially 2 years ago, He was a guy that was just sort of dictating everything offensively, and then at U17 was more of a facilitator point guard type. So seeing a little bit of just everything from him over the course of multiple seasons here. So I think that versatility is probably something that is appealing to Buzz Williams and the coaching staff here. I would love to know what their connection is, to him and how this relationship sort of came about. Something I'm going to do a little asking around about with some of the international scouts that I know when I get an opportunity to do that. So I'll report back to you guys. But yeah, I think this is just a dude that's like a solid flyer on somebody. Like he's been talked about by some draft circles. I mentioned him to some NBA draft folks that I know, and he's like on radars at the very least of someone that they're going to monitor the development of. There's some other big time schools. I know he was like kind of locked in with Louisville at one point in time. So it's not like this is a dude they kind of pulled totally from nowhere that, his only other, offer in the U.S. would have been at, I don't know, East Kentucky Appalachian Community College or wherever else the case may be. So this was a dude that was a real D1 prospect and has at least, his name kind of floating about in draft circles. So we'll see if that ever comes to fruition. But just again, not a bad dude to just sort of take a flyer on. I did mention that sort of lack of toughness and physicality and things like that have been kind of called out from him because of the strength issue. Doesn't sound like a great fit for a Buzz team on paper, but like we talked about here already, the length maybe to be disruptive will help him sort of skate by here in the short term. Just from what I've seen, I would be shocked if this is a guy that's a big contributor, in his first year of college basketball. But I really like this as a long-term play, whether again it is a red shirt or just you get him a few minutes this year when you can find the time to do it. Buzz really likes depth. We've seen situations where even if you watch their NCAA tournament game, like the one against Yale, he didn't start two of their best players and then got them, in at the first media timeout and then almost hockey sub guys just because they're playing so hard and so scrappy defensively. Like they're gonna burn through minutes with these guys and get a lot of dudes in there. So maybe there's an opportunity for him to play a little this year. And then you see where he's at long term. I think a lot of times with the international players, again, this is kind of a generalization, but these guys seem to be okay sticking around at a place a little longer. There's not as much immediate movement into the portal with some of the younger guys we're seeing come over right now. So I think that's an even better flyer to take on a guy for a long-term play here. So we'll see what kind of shakes out here from old GDP, but I'm excited about this one. That's kind of cool just to see, that drought of recruit commitments come in and have it be a name we know nothing about. So it was nice to just kind of get into the film here. I will try to get someone a little savvier on some of the international players than me on here later in the week, perhaps to add anything I may have missed. But that's the initial thoughts on Guillermo Del Pino. So let's see how it plays out for the Terps here. And I like sort of the outside the box thinking. We're getting a little later into the transfer portal. So just going out and finding dudes that can come in and potentially play a role or fit into the long-term, thread of the program here. Like, I think that's smart movement by this front office, this assistant coaching staff. So I'm liking it, and we'll just see who they come up with next. I know Jeff's been reporting over on the site about a couple dudes that might be in the mix here longer term. So we need a big man. I think that's the next domino that may fall. So stay tuned for that, and we'll get another guy that's familiar with some of those people as they commit, and just try to keep bringing you guys some insight. So again, like I said earlier, please, please, please hit that like button for us. We really do appreciate that. Tell a friend. That never hurts also. But yeah, we'll see what comes next, and we'll keep you guys up to date as we go. Remember to rate, review, subscribe, and to fear the podcast.